What types of jinns do we have? The hadith tell us one thing, the Quran tells us another thing, and put together we just get some very basic categories. Of the simplest categories is that there are Muslim jinn and non-Muslim jinn. This is very clear. And in fact, there's a very clear verse in the Quran, in Surah Al-Jinn. Allah says in the Quran, the jinn are speaking, وَإِنَّ مِنَّا الْمُسْلِمُونَ وَمِنَّا الْقَاسِطُونَ. There are some who are Muslims and there are some who fall short and are evil. The religions of the jinns are the religions of men. You have Christian jinns, Buddhist jinns, Hindu jinns, and Muslim jinns. The religions of men are adopted by the jinn. And it's not the other way around. We don't adopt their religions. They adopt ours. What does that show, by the way? Intellectually. Right? We don't adopt their religions, they adopt ours. By the way, we can also say, we don't learn their languages, they learn ours to communicate with us. And you will have jinns that speak in human languages, and this is well documented without getting all freaky on you and all that, but well documented that, the famous case of, should I or should I not? The one that was made a movie out of, right? Emily Rose. The movie that was made of Emily Rose, it is based on an actual story that from which we have tape recordings to this day, because this is back in the 60s and 70s, where a village girl, illiterate and uneducated, is speaking fluent Latin. And this is a phenomenon that psychiatrists actually know about, where a person just learns a language out of nowhere and begins speaking it fluently. Right? Now psychiatrists have their own weird and bizarre ways of explaining it. We don't need that weird and bizarre. It's very clear how a 7-year-old girl or 11-year-old girl can speak fluent Latin. Right? And you come across jinns that will be speaking in languages that the person that is speaking has never been exposed to. But these are human languages. Human languages. And therefore, this shows us as well, intellectually the jinn are not as high as us, because they have to learn our languages. We don't learn their languages. They have their language, we don't. So, we said number one, there are Muslim and non-Muslim jinn. Number two, they are different ethnicities and tribes, like we are. So there might be Desi jinn and Arab jinn, I don't know, man. I hope they have one masjid, inshallah, from the unmosqued, you know what I'm saying? But they have different ethnicities and tribes. How do we know this? Again, very roughly hinted at, or very vaguely hinted at, in Surah Al-Ahqaf, that Allah says, the jinn say, قَالُوا يَا قَوْمَنَا. They said, oh, our qawm, our people. So they have a qawm that is separate from the other jinns. So clearly they have different ethnicities and different ways of dividing themselves. How they are, what those things are, we have absolutely no idea. That is something that is beyond, it is ilm al-ghayb, and we will never know. Also, there are certain types of jinns that the Quran and Sunnah mention, and I will only mention the two that the Quran and Sunnah mentions. Otherwise, folklore mentions 10, 15. And I'll leave all of that. The Quran only mentions one special type of jinn, and that is Ifrit. We already mentioned him. قَالَ عِفْرِيتٌ مِّنَ الْجِنِّ. And the Sunnah also mentions Ifrit, by the way, that the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith of walking 3 steps back, 3 steps forward. In one version it says, an Ifrit of the jinn came to me. And what is an Ifrit of the jinn? So what we can gather from the Quran and Sunnah, the Ifrit is an especially evil and especially strong jinn. It's a type of jinn that has strength above and beyond what the other types of jinns have. And it has an evil nature that is above and beyond the evil of the average shaitan, which is pretty low bar anyway, and is going to go lower than that. Okay? We know this because the Ifrit challenged the Prophet ﷺ. Imagine how evil you must be to take on the Prophet ﷺ. And the Ifrit is the one that is saying to Sulaiman, I can bring the throne. So, perhaps some have said that an Ifrit is like what the Westerners would call like a demon type of spirit. And the other jinns are the regular evil spirits. So, in many cultures, you have this distinction of an especially evil entity, and then your regularly evil entities. So we learn this from the Quran and Sunnah, that there's an especially malevolent, especially vile, especially despicable breed of jinn. And they are the Ifrit of the jinn. And they seem to be rare, not that common, and they're not as common as the other jinn. Now there's a hadith in Musnad Imam Ahmad that scholars have different about its authenticity, but it basically mentions, in Arabic is ghul, and from this we get the English ghoul. And so there is a type of jinn that is a ghul or a ghoul, and that is just a jinn that is irritating and causing you hardships and whatnot. These are the only two types that are actually explicitly mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah. Now, folklore and legend, if you go to any book written about jinns by anybody, you will have, and is this type, and is this type, and this type. And the fact of the matter is that we don't know. This is simply ilm al-ghayb. But there is one hadith that is very fascinating, but we cannot explain it because it is ilm al-ghayb. How can you explain what you don't know? Hadith is very fascinating, and it is an authentic hadith. Our Prophet ﷺ said, Al-jinnu thalatha. Jinns are of three types. Jinns are of three types. Number one, he said, some are snakes and dogs. Number two, some are yatiruna fil hawa, flying around in the air. And number three, some are yuhillun, they camp or they live and then they go away. Now, so he categorized jinn into three categories. Scholars have attempted to extrapolate and whatnot, and the fact of the matter is, these are cryptic. But what can we generically say? There's a category of jinn that typically appears in the form of animals. This is the first category. And two animals in particular the jinns love to appear in. But sometimes there are other animals. And the two main animals that the jinns love to appear in are snakes and dogs. But this does not mean that they never appear in another form. The second category is some are yatiruna fil hawa. They are flying around in the skies. And perhaps those types of jinns have almost nothing to do with us. Perhaps. Perhaps there are many quantities of jinns that are completely separate and cut off from us, have nothing to do with us. They are yatiruna fil hawa. And again, this is ilm al-ghayb, we will never know, but maybe those are the majority of the jinn. The majority of the jinn have nothing to do with our world. They're living their lives and they're going by. And then the third type of jinn is they come and they go. This is the one that seems to want to irritate us, want to frighten us, want to come into our lives. This third category. So the majority of the jinns have nothing to do with us. They're living their lives, and the reason they become animals is to get access to our food. And then they'll become the jinn again.